The Galactic Council was a place of immense power and influence, a gathering of the universe's most advanced civilizations. Its members had seen countless species rise and fall, some known for their wisdom, others for their strength. But when a human trade delegate arrived, something completely unexpected happened. The world of the Council was about to be shaken by something no one had ever anticipated. It was an ordinary day on Earth, or so it seemed when the first reports came in. Trade and diplomacy were the usual affairs, as humans, a relatively young species in the grand scheme of the galaxy, made their first formal appearance at the Council. The humans had a reputation for their resourcefulness and their surprising ability to survive in the harshest conditions. But no one could have predicted the controversy it would soon unfold. A Xelthar delegate, a species known for their towering intellect and towering build, arrived on Earth for an official visit. Their species was strict about many things, including the sanctity of life, especially apex predators. To them, eating such creatures was not just forbidden. It was almost sacrilegious. Apex predators, in their eyes, were sacred. They were the natural rulers of their worlds, and the idea that any species would dare to challenge them was unthinkable. As the Xelthar delegate arrived on Earth, he was taken to a human settlement where a grand feast was being held. What he saw next caused his eyes to widen in disbelief. Humans, in their casual attire, were seated around long tables, enjoying a feast of unimaginable proportions. On the menu were monstrous, razor-toothed creatures, predators that were considered the deadliest on their respective planets. There was the Cinderoth, a massive sea creature with skin tougher than metal, its claws able to slice through the toughest of shells. There were also enormous land creatures, covered in scales that could withstand the fiercest of blows. To the Xelthar delegate, these were creatures that only the most fearsome of beings could ever dare to face, let alone eat. The humans, however, seemed to treat these creatures as just another meal. They sliced through the Cinderoth's thick hide with ease, expertly preparing the flesh with spices and herbs. Others grilled massive land predators, their flames licking the sides of beasts that would have made any other species tremble in fear. The smells wafted through the air, rich, smoky, and incredibly inviting. Laughter filled the air as humans shared stories, enjoying the meal like any other. The Xelthar delegate stood frozen, unable to comprehend what he was witnessing. The very idea of consuming such creatures was an affront to everything his species held sacred. He had heard stories of humans being capable of strange feats, but this was something else entirely. A species, young by galactic standards, consuming the very things that had been worshipped by countless civilizations was beyond his understanding. Shocked and disturbed, the delegate hurriedly sent an encrypted transmission back to the Galactic Council. His message was clear. The humans were barbaric. They were unworthy of joining the Council. To him, this was not just a cultural misunderstanding. It was a declaration of war against the very concept of apex predators. His report sparked a wave of outrage and confusion among the Council members. The Galactic Council was swift in its response. They called an emergency session, demanding an explanation from the human representatives. A delegation of Earth's finest diplomats was summoned to the Council chambers, their faces grim as they prepared to defend their people. The atmosphere was tense, and the Council members, who represented species from across the galaxy, watched intently. Some looked on with disgust, others with curiosity. When the human ambassador stood to speak, the chamber fell silent. The ambassador, a composed woman with a fierce look in her eyes, addressed the Council. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council, we understand your concerns," she began, her voice steady but firm. "But the truth is, what you witnessed on Earth is simply part of who we are. We've always been a species that challenges itself. We've faced predators, not as prey, but as adversaries, and we've overcome them." There was a murmur among the Council members. The Kuror, a species known for their ruthlessness in combat, exchanged glances, intrigued by this bold declaration. The human ambassador continued. Our ancestors fought to survive, just like any species. But unlike many others, we didn't just fear these creatures. We learned to hunt them, to adapt, and yes, we even ate them. It's a part of our history, and it's how we've evolved. The ambassador's words hung in the air, and the council members could hardly believe what they were hearing. The idea of a species eating apex predators, beasts that could obliterate entire armies, was almost beyond comprehension. Yet the humans were not afraid. They did not revere these creatures as gods or kings. They saw them as challenges to be conquered. The Zithara, a race known for their pacifism and reverence for life, was the first to speak up, their voice filled with unease. But you cannot just consume such creatures. They are the rulers of nature. By eating them, you are breaking the natural order. The human ambassador nodded respectfully. We understand your perspective, but we've never viewed nature as something to be worshipped. We view it as something to understand, to work with. It's how we've survived. A wave of uncertainty swept over the council. Some began to question their own species' traditions, while others felt a growing unease. The humans were not just a strange species. They were capable of something far greater than mere survival. They were capable of domination. If they could eat the apex predators of their world, what else could they achieve? The council session grew tense. The delegate from the Telfar Dominion stood and interrupted. This is madness. If we allow humans to join the council, we are opening the door to chaos. What's next? Will they challenge our sacred creatures? Will they come for the very heart of our civilizations? But the human ambassador remained calm. We don't seek to conquer anyone. We seek to understand. But we do not fear the impossible. We never have. As the session continued, it became clear that humanity's reputation was changing. No longer were they seen as weak or unworthy of attention. The very fact that they dared to challenge the natural order of the galaxy made them both feared and respected. Some species began to wonder if humans were, in fact, the future of the galaxy. Fearless, bold, and impossible to predict. The meeting ended with no clear resolution. The Galactic Council was divided. Some wanted to exclude humanity, afraid of what this new species represented. Others, however, saw potential. The humans had shown that they were not just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. In the weeks that followed, debates raged across the galaxy. But one thing was certain. Humanity's forbidden feast had forever changed the way the galaxy saw them. No longer were they just another species to be overlooked. They were now the ones everyone was watching, and they had only just begun to show their true potential. The Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. For countless millennia, the Council had debated and decided on the fate of thousands of species, each more advanced than the last. But none had ever faced such an unusual trial. Humanity had broken an ancient, sacred rule that no species, no matter how powerful, had dared to defy. Consuming apex predators was not just taboo. It was an offense punishable by exile, if not worse. And yet, here they were, humans, standing before the entire galaxy, accused of violating that very rule. Their crime? Eating creatures that, in the eyes of the Council, should never have been touched. The trial was held in a colossal chamber, filled with representatives from dozens of species, all watching with keen interest. The Council was made up of species from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, some of them as old as time itself, their cultures rooted in traditions that spanned thousands of years. Yet, when the human ambassador stepped forward to explain the actions of their species, all eyes were on them. The room was thick with anticipation, the silence hanging like a heavy fog. The human ambassador, a woman named Lila, stood tall and composed, despite the gravity of the situation. Her heart raced, but her expression remained calm, focused. She knew the stakes. The fate of humanity rested on how well she could explain the human way of life to those who had never understood it. She cleared her throat. We don't seek to insult other species, nor do we wish to challenge the natural order. We simply live in a way that has always been part of us. The room murmured as the Zithara delegate, a species known for their peaceful nature and strict adherence to the preservation of life, leaned forward with a stern look. But how can you justify eating creatures that are considered sacred? The Zithara delegate asked, their voice filled with disbelief. Apex predators are the rulers of nature. They are not meant to be consumed. Lila met their gaze with unwavering confidence. I understand your concerns, but you have to understand our history. We didn't seek out apex predators as mere prey. We saw them as a challenge, a way to test ourselves. We didn't just survive these creatures, we thrived because of them. To us, they were never gods. They were simply obstacles to overcome. There was a collective gasp from the assembly. The idea that humans saw apex predators as mere obstacles was incomprehensible to many of the species present. To them, these creatures were symbols of nature's might, beings that could not, and should not, be challenged. Yet here were humans, an inexperienced species by galactic standards, casually declaring that they had mastered what others feared. The Zelthar delegate, a towering figure with sharp, calculating eyes, raised his hand to speak. His species had a reputation for their intelligence and cunning, and it was said that they could calculate 100 moves ahead in any situation. You speak of overcoming these creatures as if it's a game, he said coldly. Do you truly understand the consequences of your actions? These creatures are not just food. They are a symbol of power, a symbol of dominance. By eating them, you challenge the very structure of the galaxy. Lila didn't flinch. She knew that the Zelthar would be the hardest to convince. We don't see it as a challenge to the galaxy's order. We see it as a reflection of our strength. Humans have always been a species that adapts. We've faced extreme conditions, both natural and man-made, and we've learned to thrive. Eating apex predators is simply part of that survival. But what about the sanctity of life? The Damar, a species of empathic beings known for their deep spiritual beliefs, asked. Their voice quivered with emotion, a mix of concern and disbelief. How can you disregard the sacredness of life, of creatures that have existed for millions of years? Lila's eyes softened as she considered their words. We respect life in every form, she said quietly. We don't take it lightly. But we also understand that nature is not kind. It is brutal. It is unforgiving. We don't shy away from that truth. We've had to face it head-on. The debate raged on for hours. The council members from species like the Kuror and the Zithara were horrified, unable to accept the humans' view. They insisted that humanity's actions were an affront to everything the galaxy had come to cherish. But there were others, those from warrior cultures or species that had seen the harshness of the universe, who began to quietly reconsider. The humans weren't like the other species. They didn't just survive. They fought back against the very forces that would have destroyed them. They were relentless, a force that would not bow to the rules that others had set. Finally, the Nartil, a species of peaceful, highly intelligent beings, stood up. They had observed the humans quietly, intrigued by their boldness. Perhaps, the Nartil delegate said thoughtfully, it is time we rethink what we value. Humans are not the first to challenge nature, but they are perhaps the first to do so with such unrelenting will. Their strength, their ability to overcome the deadliest of creatures, may be something we all need to learn from. The room fell silent once more as the Nartil's words echoed through the chamber. Slowly, murmurs began to rise. There were still many who were outraged, who could not accept the idea that apex predators should be eaten. But others were beginning to see something different. Humanity was not a species to be ignored or dismissed. They were different, yes, but that difference made them powerful, capable of things that others could never comprehend. As the trial continued, the council members debated fiercely, each species defending their own beliefs, but the tension in the room was undeniable. The humans had turned what was once a simple accusation into a galaxy-wide debate about life, strength, and survival. It wasn't just about eating apex predators anymore. It was about what it meant to be human, to fight, to adapt, and to survive against all odds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the decision was made. The Council would not expel humanity, but they would place strict restrictions on their future actions. Humanity would be allowed to continue its path, but only with a clear understanding of the consequences. They would no longer be allowed to hunt and consume apex predators without the permission of the Council. The verdict was not a victory, but it was a recognition, an acknowledgement that humanity, despite their shocking actions, had earned a place in the galaxy. As Lila stood there, hearing the verdict, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The trial was over, but the journey for humanity had only just begun. The galaxy had been shaken by their boldness, but now it had to reckon with the fact that humans were here to stay, fearless, relentless, and unyielding. In the vast reaches of the galaxy, there were many things that were considered impossible. The laws of nature had been studied and understood by countless species, and yet, when humanity came into the fold of galactic civilization, they brought with them an enigma, a biological mystery that defied all logic. Their physiology was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. It was as if the human body had been designed to break every rule that governed life in the universe. The galaxy was stunned, and the greatest minds of the Council had gathered to find an explanation. The trial had been convened in one of the most prestigious chambers in the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, their eyes trained on the human envoy standing before them. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism and curiosity. The humans had been accused of being an anomaly, a species whose biology didn't fit into any known pattern of life. And the question on everyone's mind was simple: how could a species like this exist? Lila, the human ambassador, stood confidently before the assembly. She had been chosen for this trial because of her deep knowledge of human biology and her ability to explain the unexplainable. The room was silent as she began to speak, her voice calm but steady. Honored members of the Council, she began, I understand that you are all curious, even disturbed, by what you've discovered about us. Our biology, our ability to survive in environments that would destroy other species, it all seems impossible to you. But I ask you to consider one thing. We are not an accident. We are the result of millions of years of evolution, of challenges and obstacles that we have faced and overcome. Our biology is not a flaw. It is a testament to the strength of our species. The Selthar delegate, known for their sharp intellect and strict logical reasoning, raised an eyebrow. You speak of evolution, yet your species shows no clear path of development. Your bodies can withstand extreme temperatures, survive in toxic environments, heal at a rate that defies medical science. These are not the results of natural evolution. This is something else. Lila paused, her eyes meeting the Selthar delegate's piercing gaze. Our biology, yes, it is extraordinary, but it is not impossible. As you say, we have evolved to adapt, to survive, no matter the circumstance. We do not just endure hardships, we thrive in them. We can survive in the cold vacuum of space with little more than the right equipment. We can resist poisons that would kill most life forms. Our immune systems fight off diseases that have wiped out entire species. We are the product of millions of years of trial and error, but we are not a mistake. The room was silent again as the delegates processed her words. It wasn't just the strength of humanity's biology that was baffling. It was the complexity, the way their bodies could heal from wounds that would incapacitate or even kill other species, their rapid cellular regeneration, and their ability to adapt to alien environments with remarkable speed. It all seemed impossible. One of the older delegates, the Nairtil, stood up. They were a species of highly spiritual beings who valued the sanctity of life. Their culture was built around harmony and balance, but even they could not ignore the question of humanity's biology. I have seen species that can survive harsh conditions, but not like this. No species has ever shown the ability to regenerate tissue at the rate that humans do. There are reports that some humans can survive injuries that would leave others in a state of death. How do you explain that? Lila nodded slowly, understanding the weight of their question. She took a deep breath before responding. Our regenerative abilities are tied to our cells. We possess an incredibly efficient healing process that, in many ways, is still not fully understood. Our bodies are constantly repairing themselves, rebuilding damaged tissue, and fighting off harmful agents. But more than that, our cells are constantly adapting. They learn, evolve, and adjust to the changes in our environment. It is this adaptability that makes us resilient, almost to an impossible degree. The Zithara delegate, who had been silent until now, spoke up. But it is not just your physical capabilities that are strange. There are reports of humans surviving extreme mental strain, mental trauma that would break the minds of other species. How is this possible? Lila felt the weight of their words, and for a moment she hesitated. But then she spoke with confidence, her voice steady. Our minds are capable of more than you realize. We have developed what we call mental resilience. We face hardships, both physical and psychological, that would break most beings. And yet, we continue. We adapt, we learn, we grow stronger. It is not just our bodies that regenerate, it is our minds as well. The human spirit is capable of enduring suffering and emerging from it unbroken. It is this strength that has allowed us to survive and thrive in a universe that is constantly testing us. The Dumar delegate, a species known for their deep empathy and emotional sensitivity, looked troubled. But what does this mean for the rest of us? If your biology is truly as unique as you claim, what does that say about our place in the galaxy? Could humanity one day surpass us? Lila paused, choosing her words carefully. I do not believe that our biology makes us superior to any other species. Every species in the galaxy has its strengths, its own unique abilities. What makes us different is our willingness to face the impossible. We don't run from challenges, we embrace them. And it is through this constant struggle that we grow. The room was filled with murmurs, some filled with awe, others with uncertainty. The idea that humanity could endure so much, could survive against the odds, was both inspiring and terrifying. But one thing was clear: the humans were not to be underestimated. Their biology was something no one had ever seen before, and it had given them an edge in a universe where survival was a constant battle. As the trial continued, Lila explained more about the human body, detailing the mechanisms that allowed them to heal, adapt, and endure. She spoke of their immune system, their ability to endure extreme stress, and their mental toughness. But even as she spoke, she knew that there was still much about humanity's biology that could not be explained. It was a mystery, one that the galaxy was not yet ready to solve. The trial eventually came to a close, and the delegates were left to deliberate. They had seen humanity's abilities firsthand, and they could not deny that there was something extraordinary about them. But they also understood that such power, such resilience, came with a great responsibility. The galaxy had never encountered a species quite like humans, and how they would fit into the larger cosmic order remained uncertain. As Lila left the chamber, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The trial had been long, but humanity's place in the galaxy was beginning to take shape. They were not just survivors, they were warriors in a universe that would never stop testing them. And no matter what the future held, they would face it head-on, with the impossible biology that made them who they were. The galaxy had known peace for centuries, with alliances forged between the most advanced species in the universe. Each civilization had its own strengths and weaknesses, its own way of life. But among them, the humans were different. Newcomers to the galactic stage, but with a reputation that seemed almost mythical. The elder races had heard of humanity's potential, their raw power, and their survival instincts. Yet there was one thing they didn't understand: how a species so young, so fragile, could cause such fear across the galaxy. They had seen it firsthand: the way humans reacted to danger, their ferocity in battle, their relentless drive to survive. And despite their curiosity, there was a deep fear that lingered whenever humans were mentioned. It all began when the Council of Allied Species called for a summit to discuss the growing unrest on the fringe of the galaxy. The Kerith, a ruthless and cunning species, had been expanding their territory, and it seemed that no one could stop them. The members of the council debated, and some suggested that it was time to bring humanity into the fold. The humans had been instrumental in dealing with previous threats, and their success in uniting fractured worlds had earned them a reputation. But not everyone was convinced. The Star, a powerful species of telepathic beings, voiced their concern. "Humans are dangerous," said Eldrin, the Star leader. "They are unpredictable, and their capacity for violence is unmatched. They do not think like us. They do not follow the same rules. What we call peace, they call weakness, and we cannot trust them." His words echoed through the chamber, causing others to nod in agreement. They feared what humans represented, a force that did not adhere to the established laws of galactic diplomacy. Their raw emotions, their unpredictability, made them a wild card that could either be an asset or a threat. But then, the human representative, Captain Amelia Roth, stood before the council. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tense atmosphere that surrounded her. She had heard the murmurs, felt the weight of their fear, but she didn't flinch. "I understand your concerns," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You fear what we are capable of. But I ask you this, what are you afraid of? The truth is, we are not like you. We don't think like you. We are driven by survival, by the will to protect our own, and to fight when all seems lost. We are not bound by the same laws of peace that you are." The room fell silent as her words sank in. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Amelia continued, "But let me make one thing clear. The fear you feel is not something you can control. Fear is an instinct, just like our will to survive. And it is this very fear that has helped us survive in a universe that doesn't care whether we live or die. We fight because we must. We do not fight for power or glory. We fight because we have no other choice." Her words struck a chord with some, but the Star remained unconvinced. "You speak of survival," Eldrin retorted, "but it is not survival that worries us. It is your capacity for destruction. If your species were to rise up, there would be nothing left of the galaxy but ashes." Amelia's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "You underestimate us, Eldrin. We do not seek to destroy. But when faced with the impossible, we find a way. And that's what you fail to understand. You think we are unpredictable because we don't follow the same rules as you. But it is precisely because we don't follow your rules that we have survived. We survive because we are different." As the days went on, the tensions between the council members and the human representatives grew. The council had not yet decided whether to trust humanity, but one thing was becoming clear. The fear that the galaxy felt toward humans was no longer enough to dismiss them. The humans had proven time and again that they were not to be ignored. And in the face of growing threats, it seemed that their strength might be the key to survival. Then the unthinkable happened. The Kerith, who had been expanding their territory unchecked, launched an attack on a neutral planet. The Council of Allied Species had no choice but to act. They had long discussed their strategies, but none had ever anticipated the Kerith would strike so soon or with such force. As the news spread across the galaxy, panic began to set in. The Council quickly realized that they could no longer rely on diplomatic measures. A response was needed, and it needed to be swift. It was then that the human fleet arrived. Amelia Roth, commanding the human forces, stood at the helm of her ship, watching the battle unfold. The Kerith had underestimated the humans. They had expected the humans to cower, to negotiate, but instead, they encountered something far more dangerous: humanity's unyielding resolve. The battle was fierce, and the odds were stacked against them. The Kerith outnumbered the human forces by a considerable margin, but it didn't matter. The humans fought with a ferocity that no one could match. They adapted, they improvised, and they fought like their survival depended on it. Because it did. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn. The Kareth forces, who had once been unstoppable, found themselves on the defensive. The humans were relentless, pushing forward with every ounce of strength they had. The Kareth had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive. When the battle was over, the Kareth fleet lay in ruins, and the human forces stood victorious. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the humans' improbable victory was broadcasted across the stars. It wasn't just a victory in battle. It was a declaration that humanity's strength, resilience, and unyielding spirit could no longer be ignored. In the days that followed, the fear that had once surrounded humanity began to shift. It was no longer fear of the unknown, but respect. The galaxy now understood that the humans were not a species to be underestimated. They were a force to be reckoned with, a species that would not back down in the face of adversity. And as the council reconvened, it was clear that the balance of power had shifted. The humans, once seen as an unpredictable threat, were now viewed as a powerful ally. The fear that had once defined humanity's place in the galaxy had turned to respect. The Council now recognized that the humans were not just survivors. They were warriors who had earned their place in the galaxy. As Captain Amelia Roth left the chamber, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The galaxy had seen the truth. Humanity was not just a species to be feared. They were a species to be respected. And in time, they would prove that their strength, resilience, and unwavering spirit would make them one of the most important allies the galaxy had ever known. The galaxy had always been a place of endless complexity and conflict, where the strong preyed on the weak, and peace was a fragile illusion. But for centuries, it had followed a certain order, an understanding that each species knew their place, and power was defined by ancient treaties and military might. That was until humans came onto the scene, disruptors of the status quo, and the galaxy was never the same again. It all began with the arrival of the first human warship in the outer sectors, a massive vessel unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was not the most advanced ship by galactic standards, nor was it the most powerful, but it carried with it something far more dangerous: the unyielding will of a species that had risen from nothing to conquer their own hostile planet and had never known the meaning of defeat. The galaxy watched in both awe and fear as the human fleet docked on the capital station of the Zirali, a highly advanced species that prided itself on its intellect and military strength. The Zirali had heard of humans, of course, but they dismissed them as primitive, thinking that such a young species could never challenge the established order of the galaxy. The humans, led by Captain Jake Callahan, had other plans. As Captain Callahan stepped onto the Zirali station, he immediately felt the tension in the air. The Zirali were not used to being confronted with a species that lacked the politeness of diplomacy or the strategic patience of the older races. They were logical, precise, and expected others to be the same. But the humans? They were different. They didn't care for politics. They didn't care for diplomacy. What they cared about was survival. And in the cold expanse of space, that was something the galaxy had yet to fully understand. "We're here," Callahan said simply as he surveyed the Zirali assembly hall, his voice calm but filled with a power that resonated in the air. His eyes locked with those of the Zirali leaders, who had gathered to greet him. The Zirali leader, Sorek, a towering figure with sharp features and dark, reflective eyes, spoke first. "You are humans. I have read about you. You are strong, but not wise. This galaxy is governed by understanding and balance. You do not have the patience for such things." Callahan's lips curled into a subtle smile. "Maybe we don't," he replied, "but we've managed to survive where others have failed. And now, we're here to make sure you understand something. The galaxy doesn't belong to you or anyone else. It belongs to those who are willing to fight for it." Sorek's eyes narrowed, as if calculating whether the human was bluffing or truly believed what he said. "You are reckless," Sorek said, his voice cold and dismissive. Callahan's smile faded slightly, but he didn't flinch. Reckless? Maybe. But we've survived wars that would have destroyed other species. We've seen horrors that would make your people tremble. And yet, we're still here. We don't give up. That's why we're here. The Xyrali leaders were taken aback by the sheer audacity of the humans' words. In all their years, they had never encountered such directness, such raw confidence. It was unsettling. The next few days were filled with tense negotiations. The Xyrali insisted on maintaining their dominance over the galaxy's key trade routes, while humans pressed for equal rights to explore and establish their own colonies. The conversation quickly grew heated, and the underlying tension between the two species was palpable. It seemed like an impasse until a Xyrali scout fleet, hidden in the outskirts of their territory, made a sudden move, breaking the fragile peace that had been established. The Xyrali leaders had underestimated the humans' response. Without hesitation, Callahan ordered a counterstrike. It wasn't a massive fleet, only a handful of human warships, but they hit fast, precise, and without mercy. The Xyrali were taken by surprise, their ships scattered and their communications disrupted. Callahan's tactics were unconventional, but effective. He understood that in war, fear was just as powerful as strength. As the battle raged, the Xyrali realized they had made a grave mistake. Humans didn't fight by the rules. They fought to win. They adapted quickly, learned on the fly, and used every advantage available. It wasn't just their ships or weapons that made them formidable. It was their mindset. The Xyrali had relied on their superior technology, thinking it would give them the upper hand, but they had underestimated the humans' ability to turn the tides of war with nothing more than sheer willpower. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Callahan's voice echoed through the comms, rallying his fleet. "We're not here for war, but we will fight for what's ours. And we will win, because we have no other choice." The Xyrali fleet eventually retreated, battered and broken, and the humans emerged victorious. It wasn't a complete defeat for the Xyrali, but it was enough to send shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The humans had proven themselves. No longer were they a species to be underestimated. The galaxy had witnessed firsthand the kind of warriors the humans had become, relentless, resourceful, and unafraid to do whatever it took to achieve their goals. But the consequences of the battle were far-reaching. The Xyrali had been forced to negotiate, but they had also learned to respect the humans in a way they hadn't before. The other species in the galaxy, too, watched the events unfold with growing concern. Humanity's rise was no longer a question of if, it was a matter of when. The human victory had triggered something else, too. A shift in the galaxy's power dynamics. Suddenly, other species began to take humanity seriously. The alliances that had once excluded them now found themselves considering the humans as equal partners or potential threats. The old balance was crumbling, and a new order was taking shape. Captain Callahan returned to his ship after the battle, his mind heavy with the realization that the galaxy had changed. The humans had made their mark, and it would never be the same again. But with that change came a heavy burden, the responsibility of shaping a new era in a galaxy that had never known true peace. As the human fleet moved away from the Xyrali capital, Callahan stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. He knew the fight wasn't over. There would be others, other challenges, other enemies who would test humanity's resolve. But the galaxy had learned something important today. The humans were not just survivors. They were conquerors, and they had the power to change everything.